I see why Jonah ran. Jessica, why are you running? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Tea is for Today podcast. I'm happy to have you here. I'm happy to have myself here as well, because if you've listened to the last episode, you know why. If you haven't listened to the last episode, why are you on this video? You need to rewind yourself and go to the video before this one and make sure you give it a listen. But I'm just trying to be consistent. I'm trying to be obedient out here in these streets. And so we here and we back. And so on today's episode, as I've been reflecting on my journey with this whole podcast, blog, everything in between, it's really sparked some interesting conversations that I've had with friends, and just how, although we may be in different situations, how we're experiencing similar things. And something that, or a book that I've been reading recently in the Bible is the book of Jonah. And I remember one day I was reading it and I was like, man, I see why Jonah ran. It's like, there's times where we can read these Bible books and we're like, man, how could the person do this, or how could they do that in XYZ? But if you really put yourself in the character's shoes, I can 100% see why some of them did the things that they did. And the story of Jonah is just really interesting. If you haven't read it, I would encourage you to just go give it a run through, so some of the things that I say here make sense to you. But in just a summary, the book starts off, it doesn't give any introduction really of Jonah's life before that, or really who he was. It basically starts off boom, God came to Jonah and told him, hey, go deliver this message to the people of Nineveh. Jonah said, nope, and went the opposite way. And I just think that is so funny that that's literally how the story starts off. But as I've been meditating on the story of Jonah, it had me thinking about my own life and my own journey as far as with creative things. And so I'm like, okay, I see why Jonah ran. Jessica, why are you running? And so that's what I want to talk about with you all today. Why are you running? Because I know I am not the only person out there that God may have given you an idea about something, told you to do something, and you don't want to do it. We've all been there. And I'll say for myself, as far as I can remember, about just different things that I know I should be doing or should have done, I will say for the most part, I would call myself a pretty obedient person. There are not too many things that I can think of I knew I was supposed to do that and I didn't do. But this situation right here is just actually really wild to me, because I was really out here and saying no. Really saying no. And I may not have said no verbally with my mouth, maybe I did, but definitely through my actions, for sure. And so I had to think to myself, what was causing me to have the reaction, or what was causing me to, not follow through with what I knew that I was supposed to do. And I think when we come into times of where we feel opposition, whether it be where we feel opposition, period, I think it's good to pause and really ask ourselves questions. Because one thing I've learned is, just because you're feeling an emotion about something doesn't necessarily make what you're feeling true. doesn't make it accurate, right? And so we need to pause and like ask ourselves questions before we start jumping to conclusions. And so I literally took some time and I was like, okay, Jessica, why don't you want to do these things? Like, you was doing it in the past and then you stopped. Why? And I realized the moment where my actions were being and saying no is when I overcomplicated the task. I'm gonna let that sink in. The moment that my actions changed to being indifferent about the situation is when I started to overcomplicate what I was supposed to do in the first place. Like, I can remember when I first started this journey, it was enjoyable. I was having fun. There wasn't any pressure, and all of these type of feelings like I'm good on this started coming when I started overcomplicating things. When I started looking at other platforms like, man, maybe I should incorporate that, or ooh, maybe I should start doing that, and putting unnecessary pressure on myself that didn't need to be there in the first place. Because in all reality, we can go and look at what similar people are doing as far as what it relates to what we are doing, but we don't always factor in what their starting point is. And so when we're looking at these other individuals or these other examples, nothing wrong with looking at examples, but then we're not connecting in our brains that, okay, when I'm coming across this page, they may be how many years in the game, right? And me, I'm a young thing. I'm fresh, I'm new in this arena. And so I start wanting to do things at month 2 that people maybe didn't start doing until year 2. And I'm not saying that because, you're starting something fresh that it has to look a certain way, but I can just speak for myself. I was having fun and then I wasn't. And when things start becoming unfun, I'm like, I don't want to do this no more. And it wasn't even the thing of it becoming unfun, because of course we're not always going to want to do something. I get that. But it was the unnecessary pressure. And I also want to talk about that because, one, I don't mind feeling pressure to do something. I actually prefer pressure when I do different things because it makes me perform in a way that I wouldn't if there wasn't any pressure. So I don't mind pressure. I don't mind challenges or anything like that. What I don't like is unnecessary pressure due to unrealistic expectations of what the end product should be. And that's another thing. It's like at the beginning, right? I had a clear idea of what I was going to do, how I wanted to do it, and how I saw myself moving forward. And as the time progressed, I no longer had a clear idea of necessarily what I wanted to do, which also brought me to somewhere down the line, I stopped asking questions, and not necessarily asking myself questions, but like I wasn't making sure that what I was doing was aligning with what God wanted me to do. Because at the end of the day, like, this idea didn't come from myself, right? It was placed in me, birthed through me for a purpose, right? And so I was neglecting a whole part in the process where I need to make sure that I was still in alignment with the person who gave me the idea in the first place. And so now, okay, all of these things, I'm operating and putting pressure on myself that no one put on me, right? I'm doing something and I don't know if I'm still in alignment with how I'm supposed to be doing it or what this thing even needs to be looking like. And so as I was reading the book of Jonah, I was like, man, this is so many of us, where we know we're called to do something, right? Like, we have an idea, but then it's our idea or our gifting now is something's being required of us. So we're asked to do something. And thinking about Jonah, right? He knew he was called to be a prophet. But I thought to myself, could it be a thing where Jonah's expectation of who he thought God called him to be was different from God's plan for Jonah's life? And that is so relatable, because how many times have we thought, okay, God is calling me to do this for this reason, and the plan that God has doesn't even compare or line up with anything for what our expectations are. And that's where a lot of us, and that's where I found myself. I thought that I was doing this for a particular reason, and that wasn't the reason. And so I was just very loud and very wrong. And I was doing all of these things, right? Side-eyeing, upset, doing things begrudgingly, where if I would have just stuck to the script, kept things simple, asked questions, who would know where we would be today? And so as I'm going through and reading the story of Jonah and just thinking through these things, I just realized how much the story resonates with so many of our own stories and just the people's lives around me. And I thought to myself that, we all got a little bit of Jonah in us. Let me think of a song, but we all got a little, we all have the capacity to be a Jonah. And if you read through the book of Jonah, it's only 4 chapters, but it's just funny how, it's not funny because, he lived it, that was his life, but it's just very interesting how the chapters are laid out. And then even how the book ended, it didn't even end with a conclusion. It just a statement and then boom, that's it. And so it's like chapter 1, we have that he ran, right? So he ran, he went on the ship went into mayhem. They were trying to figure out, what's going on. Why did the storm come? Jonah told them, I'm the reason why y'all having troubles. And that's a whole other story for another day. And they didn't want to throw Jonah over because why? It's a nice man. Why throw him over? That ship got a rocking and a rolling and said, oh no, Jonah got to go. And so they threw him over, right? And then he gets swallowed by the whale. And then he's asking for mercy and forgiveness. First he ran. Then he asked for forgiveness, right? And then he's like, okay, chapter 3, obedience. I'm going to do what you call me to do. And then it's like he forgot again. And then now he's mad about the outcome in chapter 4, right? And that's how the story ends. We don't see the resolve of him getting better or understanding the perspective, of God. It's just that he's sitting mad that God saved the people. And it's just crazy. If you read the Bible from the perspective of these were actually real people and it's not just stories, the lessons will resonate with you differently when you read the Bible from that perspective. And so as we are on the topic of why are you running, I want to bring on just different people that are in my life that, have similar stories of running from the call on their life, essentially, or just having adverse feelings about what God is calling them to do in a particular season. And so I hope this episode encourages you. I hope it lets you to know that there are other people experiencing the same thing that you're experiencing, and it gives you a little bit of insight how to deal with these things as they come along. So I'll see you all next time on the next episode.